black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and I'd like to welcome you to the Umoja Circle. And for those of you who are new to this show, the Umoja Circle is an African-centered talk show where the purpose of it is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. And also, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is the understanding that only through dialogue can there be a shift of consciousness. And when there's a shift of consciousness, there's a shift in your world. Our topic today is going to be shared with me by my guest, and I'd like to introduce my guest, Baba Anda Maat. Welcome to the Umoja Circle, and man, we had a nice discussion on the first show, the part one of this series, and what this show is about. You can see in the desk in front of us, there's a myriad of books. Okay, and we are basing it on the scholarship of, we started in the last show talking about one of our favorite scholars and geniuses, intellectual giants, Dr. John Henry Clark. And but we will continue, we started to continue to talk about other great scholars who have influenced our thinking. Okay, and like I said in the previous show, and I always say this all the time, knowing a thing requires thinking, but thinking requires study. And if you're not in these things called books, like the great scholars that we're going to be talking about, and you're going to see a thread line through all of them is that they had to go through the books. Brother Anda, how do you feel about what I just said?
You know, I feel, brother, you're right on point, and it's continuation of our past conversation, and that is that we have to dig into these books, because in these books is really our history, our story. These books talk to us, you know,
exactly.
And we can communicate with the past if we dive into these books. We could talk to those who walked before us, and we can gain information from them.
Yeah, I like that point. They talk to us through the books. It's a journey, and Dr. Clark taught that also. Some of his best friends were his books.
Yes,
you know?
and I think if we can get back to that, because also as they talk to us, it's an internal conversation. At least I know, as we're reading, many times we're reading the words that's written on the page, but we're having an internal conversation with ourselves.
I do it all the time.
You know?
Do it all the time.
So, and I think that's why it's so important that we take the books, the information, and then we have to be select on what we're reading and exposing our minds to. And I think, you know, as you was opening up, that's one of the things that, you know, struck me was that, it's a lot of information out there in this world. But the world that we want to create, we have to be intentional and look into certain books.
Keyword intentional.
And books that reflect our history, our culture, and give us greater knowledge of ourselves.
Because brother, the nature of the history that is given to a people will shape how, like you said, how they think about themselves. And if we're calling ourselves a certain N-word, or we're calling our women B's, we weren't born with that knowledge.
No.
So the environment we're in is giving it those words and the perception of self.
Because I think a lot of times, Brother Smoke, we are speaking someone else's language. I know we all speak this English, but when we use certain terms, derogatory terms toward ourselves and each other, we're really speaking someone else's language. And that's why it's important that we correct ourselves and start speaking affirmative, corrective language for us as a people. And that's what I find in many of these books that we have on the table here, is that it's affirmative, it's constructive language that redirects our thinking, and ultimately we have greater conversations, because then we put aside that other language that's, you know, don't speak to us, and we can start talking about things that are important to us.
I look at history as the light that shows us how we got to this moment.
Okay.
If you don't understand that history, if you don't understand that precedent where you came from. You know, I call the present moment the pre-sent moment. The pre-sent moment was sent by a decision we made or a thought that we had in the past, and it's presented to us in the present. We are the creators and definers of ourselves.
That's right.
And our situation. We say, well, bad luck. Well, what kind of decision? Hell, to me, on this plane of existence, is the worst possible result of your choices, decisions, and actions.
Yes.
You create your own hell.
Yes. You know, and it's interesting because in the Ifa tradition, they talk about Ori. Ori is head. So really they're saying your head really directs your course or your destiny. But I think I take it in terms that how you think really directs your destiny. The choices you make based upon the knowledge you have directs your destiny.
That's the thing. Thought, then there's the action, and then there's the result of the action. Cause and effect. It says it in science, but our ancestors were saying it thousands of years before this thing called physics came into being. So we are an ancient people. So let's talk about the people who taught us these things.
Yes,
let's go to some of the images of some of these great scholars. Now, we start with this great image right here. You see Dr. Clark on the right side of your screen, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen. I know Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. I think that's Brother Williams. He was from a Trinidadian historian. I'm not sure, but I can recognize the two in the back. But those are that's a brain trust right there. Let's go on to the next one to see. Okay, now this is, well, you just talk. You say it.
But this is Dr. John Henry Clark, of course, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, and Dr. Chancellor Williams. Now, these, of course, are all great scholars. Chancellor Williams he wrote a book, and I think you have it right there, Destruction of Black Civilization.
Yeah. I think I got another image of him. Let's go to the next one. Let's see if now this is the one I'm talking about. Yes, this is that book, Destruction of Black Civilization. This is Dr. Chancellor Williams. He was a teacher, professor at DC, Howard University, but he was a scholar. He studied at Oxford. He got his PhDs, and he did a 16-year study along the African coast. I mean, talking to the people before he came with this book.
And it's interesting, something in here, and I think...
Go ahead.
And
he got his book. He got his copy. He got his copy.
Because he opens up with this, and if I can read it.
Go for it.
It says, what became of the black people of Summer, the traveler asked the old man, for ancient records show that the people of Sumer were black. What happened to them? The old man sighed. They lost their history, so they died.
Wow.
So, when he wrote this book, and he's made a point, because I've heard his lecture, he said that I wrote this book not as so much a history book as a study book, because I wanted us as a people to go in and study our history and extract from the book things that we needed to understand about our rise and our fall as a people.
It's out there. These books are out there. That's what we want to let you know. Why are you still asking these questions about who were these people that were brought over on those enslaved ships? They were not savages. They were part of ancient civilizations and culture, great empires.
That's right.
They taught the people who later on came and kidnapped them. Okay? Right. Then this research has been done by these great scholars like the great Chancellor Williams, who taught students at Howard University, who studied at Oxford University. That's right. Okay? Who got his PhD at American University. So these are brilliant scholars, but they also understood that they were doing this for their people. Let's go on to the next one. Now, this is this master teacher. You see, he was already recognized, the younger-looking Dr. Henry Clark. He's a world-renowned master teacher. When we say master teacher, it's on a book.
Yeah.
Okay?
And
we didn't come up with it arbitrary, but he's been considered in the black community for decades.
And I agree. And I think it's an appropriate title, brother.
Yeah.
Master teacher.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. Go for it. That's your.
This is the autobiography of Malcolm X, of course, with as told by Alex Haley.
Yeah.
I always tell you, brother, this is probably the most impactful book in my life because reading this autobiography of Malcolm X, I could connect with so much of the struggles of being a black male in America.
The brother went to prison.
Yeah, I mean, his mother and father were Garveyites. They're taken out of his life. He grows up. He pretty much grows up on the streets, and then in prison.
And he started what? Reading.
Started reading, gaining knowledge
about his history.
He said he read everything in the library. He read the dictionary from A to Z, and then the other thing though is that not only did he start reading and studying, he started applying that knowledge, and he started teaching others. So, under the teaching of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he went out and started educating others about information now he had. So, brother, I mean,
that's what I do with the Umoja Circle. That's what you do with your stores as a bookseller and other things that you bring out. We try to pass on that information. So, you know, a true leader, you've heard me say this before, is not the person that says, follow me. It's the one that creates other leaders.
That's right.
A true teacher is not the one that's at the head of the class and get all the accolades. It's the one who creates other teachers. That's an African thing.
That's right.
We say African because that's what this thing called Homo sapiens sapiens that look like us or look like any other human being that walks on this earth started on the continent of Africa, 400,000 years ago. And this is all scientific. Yeah. Okay, and they didn't just leave Africa and then become brilliant and then came back and kidnapped us. Those same people that were left there created the first schools and created the great civilizations and had spiritual concepts that were later on transferred to Christianity and Mohammedanism and Judaism. But it started on the continent of Africa, and we got to understand this thing. And when people like Malcolm, this is a book. My book here is based on many of his speeches. Malcolm Speaks, which is another great book that you need to do. And this is what we're trying to show you, that we do have the scholarship. We do have the people who did the work. Let's go on to the next one. I consider him a polymath. And a polymath, for those of you who might not know, is a man who has multiple disciplines, a person who can be brilliant in multiple things. He was an Egyptologist, a linguist. What else was he? A historian. This man was so brilliant that the literature that the people in Sweden who did the Nobel Prize asked him in the 70s, from 77 to 80, 1977 to 80, to pick people who he think were brilliant enough to get the Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel Prize in literature. Okay, this is who he is.
The book there, I see you have his book.
Another book
before Columbus.
This is another one that turned me on to him. If you don't know, if you're still asking if black people came through to the Americas, this man in 1976 wrote this book. This is like the 24th edition. I don't know how many editions. This came out in 1976, where he proved by 11 different scientific disciplines that they did.
Yeah, the Africans had come to America before Columbus.
In the Olmecs.
In the Olmec civilization. So I think that should be one of the required readings to help us to understand.
Exactly, especially if you're here in Texas and you're close to Mexico, where they have because that's where the Olmec, they don't know who the Olmecs are, but they knew that this was a civilization that existed from 1200 BC and disappeared around 400 BC, but they created these giant heads. And on one of the heads that Dr. Van Sertima showed in this book, which he got this information. You look at this picture? This is one of those Olmec heads. And look what you see. Braided hair, African hair. And they found these things going back to 1200, 800, 600, 500 BCE, okay? Before the Common Era. That these people, Africans, were coming across the ocean on those currents. Okay, let's go to the next one. There's another multi-genius, the great Sheikh Anta Diop. You know, He made his name popular on the continent of Africa, in Dakar. In the 60s, they had a festival, the Festival of Man, in which they announced only two people who had the most brilliant minds and had the effect on black people on the continent of Africa and all over the world. He was one of them, and W.E.B. Du Bois was one. Okay, this was in Dakar in the 1960s at a festival where he was declared for his brilliance.
You know, and some of the work he did that was very impactful is that he went and really documented with showing that the ancient Egyptians were African, melanized people. He developed, as you know, the melanin test, dosage test, where they would take skin from the mummies, showing that they had the content of melanin that would be considered like us as black people. And because of that, he also said, and I always remember the quote in the sense that he said, until we dare to reconnect our history with ancient Egypt, we will be suspended in air. Meaning that just like European people connect their history to Rome and
Greece, yes, exactly.
We must reconnect our history as a people to ancient Kemet, land of the blacks, or we know of Egypt, because that is the point, one of our points of departure when we talk about the greatness of us as a people.
And on this book here that I got, and that's one of the stories is in there. Okay, this is a great starter book, a Nile Valley Civilization by the great Anthony Browder, who's around today. In fact, he's studying a crypt, a tomb of a ancient Egyptian as we speak right now. One of the first black people to actually do that. And in that book, he talks about that conference. What Baba Anda was talking was called the UNESCO, United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO sites, you know, they're the ones. But they decided in 1974 to answer the question of whether the Egyptians were black. And they brought all the greatest minds, anthropologists, linguists, iconographers, and Egyptologists at that time, with 20-something of them. Only two black Africans was Sheikh Anta Diop and Dr. Obenga, right? And this is what they said, okay, at the end of this conference, because everybody was told what they were doing, and these two, especially Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, blew them out of the water with their research. They said, although the preparatory working papers sent out by UNESCO gave particulars of what we desired, okay? Not all participants had prepared communications comparable with the painstakingly researched contribution of Professor Sheikh Anta Diop and Obenga. There was consequently a real lack of balance in the discussion. They blew them out the water. This is what UNESCO says. And that melanin dosage test that he said is just that, you know, and we used to work in the lab. And we know that, you know, and they just have a chemical that ethyl benzoate, you put it on that skin of the mummies. Oh, they use the word mummy, but that's a European term. And what it does is you put it under ultraviolet light or out in the sun, and what it does is crystallize the melanin in the skin, and it also makes it fluorescent. So you can put it under the microscope, and you see the crystallized granules of melanin. Okay, fluorescent, they glow. So you can count the melanin granules. So if there's a lot of melanin, like you or me or Baba Anda out there, you will have a lot of these crystallized melanin. This was the test, and it was done in 1976, and y'all still asking whether the Egyptians were black. Please, they know this.
That's right.
You see, this is what we do at the Umoja Circle. We talk about facts. I'm not using somebody I use on YouTube. I'm talking about the scholars who did the work that looked like us, like Sheikh Anta Diop. Let's go on. We'll try. Now, this is another brilliant mind. I got a book here with many of his books. Some, you know, William Eckhart Burckhardt, W.E.B. Du Bois, Edward Burckhardt Du Bois. Okay, another one of those brilliant. He's the second What, the first man to get a PhD in Harvard?
Yeah.
You know, what do you have to say about this brother?
I mean, if you're talking about probably the greatest intellectual giant here in America, of course, W.E.B. Du Bois, one of his famous books is Souls of Black Folks.
Souls of Black Folks, exactly. Talented 10.
Yeah.
Chapter 7, Souls of Black Folks.
So just his writing, and then he was very instrumental in helping to develop Pan-Africanism to a degree, because he participated and attended the Pan-African conference that took place, even with, of course, the future great leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta.
Jomo Kenyatta, yes.
In Manchester. But the idea, I think, the thing that stands out to me about W.E.B. Du Bois, he was such a tremendous scholar and a teacher and an educator.
He was a sociologist, wasn't the earliest sociologist, and he focused on us.
Yes.
Okay, the sociology concepts that affect how we were affected by segregation, how we were affected by Jim Crow laws. Okay, what was we have the scholarship, and again, it's in books. Okay, he's the one who came up with the talented test. And he's the one who talked about the dual consciousness, that we have a consciousness when we're out in the social structure, which is the everyday life that we have to deal with as people of African descent, but there's another consciousness when we talk to each other, okay? So we know, how do we look to, how we do to each other and how we do when we go out there. We have a dual consciousness that he came up with, that brilliant concept, a way of seeing how black people have to do. And, you know, and we're not getting taught, because most white Americans don't even think in that term, you know, because they're just thinking that they're teaching us these great classical stuff, which have to do with Rome and Greece, but they don't understand the people that their ancestors kidnapped, don't see anybody that look like them. What kind of psychology does that create in the people? Because
I think what you're speaking of, brother, is the double consciousness. We know as black people in America, we have to have that double consciousness in the sense of where we go into a space, we got to be thinking almost.
We got to switch.
Yeah, we got to switch, because we got this American mind, we got this African mind, and we got to be able to balance and understand which mind. You know, at some point, brother, I'd love for us to come back and have a conversation about that, because I really have been reflecting on that, just to understand it of how that dual consciousness, that double consciousness works and impacts us in our thinking and behavior as a people.
You're always welcome back, brother. These conversations that we have. This is why when we are on the phone, we can't talk for about 5 minutes. These are the kind of conversations. But you need somebody who could do that. You know, because otherwise you have to stop and explain to a person, you know, what you mean when we have these conversations. Because we know we study. Knowing requires thinking, but thinking requires study. And you can't, how many people could have this conversation, you think, out there, brother? You know, we should be having these conversations at the dinner table, you know, at work, or, you know whatever.
I think this should be everyday conversation.
Thank you.
This should be the things we're talking about as we're walking the streets, as we're playing, whatever we're doing in our homes. But these are the conversations we should be having. But this means that we have to dig into the information that will give us the consciousness to have these kind of conversations.
If you don't have the knowledge, you know, knowing requires thinking. If you don't, we can't have these conversations where we don't know. Okay, or what we being pumped in by the nonsense that's being pushed out there that we tend to latch on to and have conversations on, you know. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, this is somebody that I know both of us like. You wrote his book.
Of course, that is the great Dr. Carter G. Woodson, of course, the father of Black History Month. Of course, it started off as Negro History Week in 1926.
Right.
But one of his most impactful books is The Miseducation of the Negro, where Dr. Carter G. Woodson really helps us to understand how we have been miseducated as a people. And then in some ways trying to help us to correct ourselves, because if you're miseducated, meaning that you don't have the knowledge of yourself, you think very little of yourself, you will behave, and going back to some of the terms you had mentioned earlier, we will use language that degrades us. We will do things that undermine our own development. But if you have the proper education, then you are self-determined people, you are self-loving people, you build and create for yourself in your community. And I think Carter G. Woodson, and I say this, brother, you know, when Dr. Carter G. Woodson started at that time Negro History Week, he made it clear, brother, that we should study our history throughout the year.
That's
and
the
then
purpose of Black History
Negro
Month.
History Week, or now Black History Month, that's the time we should come together and let everyone know all the things we have learned throughout the year.
We're still doing it wrong. You know, we just don't do it at that time. We're supposed to be doing like what we're doing, studying and understanding our history throughout the year.
Yes.
Then come back.
So I really think to honor Dr. Carter G. Woodson, really, brother, is that we should be studying our history, and then during, of course, Black History Month, that's the time we come together and share the great information we have learned.
Have these conversations.
Yeah.
Let's go on. We got about 2 minutes, but we'll do it. Marcus Mosiah Garvey. You know, again, what humans have done, humans can do. At the peak of his UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, around the 1919s and 1920s, this is another Jamaican. Okay, a lot of these folks, the people don't understand that we didn't see ourselves as Jamaican, and we didn't see ourselves as, we saw ourselves as Africans back in those days. And he came over here, and at the peak, he said Malcolm family was a Garveyite.
Yes.
They were race people. They were proud of their Africanness. He had a population of 6 million, and that's been throughout the Caribbean, Central and South America, and throughout the United States were memberships and Garvey organizations.
Brothers and sisters, I was definitely asked that we learn about the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, had the largest organization, a movement of black people here in America and throughout the world at the time on the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And I would just say he gave us the red, black, and green flag. He gave us much more than that. And I think to learn about the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey is really is to learn the greatness of us as a people and how we can organize and come together.
Yeah, when we talk about
things.
economics and when we talk about coming together, you have these models of possibilities.
Yes.
Okay, that's where you go into the past. You know, again, it brings the light to the present moment and what you need. We have to stop there. There's more, but we're running out of time as usual. I hope you enjoyed what you heard in the last 2 shows, and you learned a little something about reading and why we need to read books. Got anything last to say? And if you want to get in contact with him, his information is underneath his
well, you know, brother, of course, we encourage us to read books, and we have a bookstore, Mod Bookstore and more, and we invite you to come out. It's at 3455 Martin Luther King Drive. That's a place where you can get these books and build your own library.
Okay, and until next time, though, peace, hope, bye-bye. Hope you like what you heard.